Welcome, everyone, to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have an incredible guest with me today. This is someone who I deeply admire, deeply respect. He is one of my mentors, and he really helped me turn the corner last year when it comes to my business and the impact that I want to make. He is the founder of an incredible supplement company called Microbiome Labs. And so I'm going to be sharing more about MBL, and we're going to dive into the topic today of leaky gut, because it's one of those things that most people don't realize is this underlying root cause issue, but it can be the one thing that once you address it, you get to have the health that you want. So Kiran Krishnan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to share about Microbiome Labs first, because this is a company you created. When we met, you had the graciousness of sitting down with me and sharing with me like the path you took, the way you created it, all the things I shouldn't do on my path to creating my supplement company. And I'll never forget, you said, you're just like us. Just keep going. You've got this. Just change a few key things. But MBL, the way I heard of it was my product line is carried in doctor's offices. And so all day, my job is to meet with all my incredible practitioners. And I kept seeing this product, Mega Spore-Biotic. And so by the 10th time, I asked the practitioner, how do you feel about this product? Is it working in your patients? And they said, actually, yeah, it's a wonderful product. And I'm seeing the difference. So will you share a little bit about your story of the discovery and creation of what you made for all of us here in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you'd asked me a few years before we founded Microbiome Labs, if that was something that was on our radar or on our path, I would say absolutely not. We had no intention of starting our own brand and building our own supplement line and company to service healthcare practitioners. I had two other companies at that time that were more behind the scenes. So these were ingredient development companies, research companies that I was doing clinical research. I was always quite comfortable being behind the scenes, kind of driving technology and science and research. And that was, in my view, slotted to be my path. I was, fulfilled in many ways and enjoying some degree of success as well. We were hired, my research company was hired by a large multinational to study probiotics, to kind of develop this idea of what is the next generation of probiotics, what's going on with the probiotic world and all this refrigerated stuff and 20 strains and 100 billion CFUs and, that whole direction of things. We were supposed to investigate those and kind of make a recommendation for how they should approach probiotics. And in doing that, I came to realize quite quickly that there's a lot of nonsense out there in the world of probiotics, right? Just the approach that companies were taking, the types of strains and formulas they were putting together, the refrigeration versus non-refrigeration, these multitude of strains together kind of thrown in what I call a kitchen sink approach. All of those ideas, I started dissecting it from a scientific perspective and realizing that there's just too much nonsense out there. Very little of it was validated by science. There was very little scientific rationale behind a lot of the ideas and approaches, and the things that companies were claiming as being important. For example, the number of species, the CFU count, the refrigeration, all these things, right? So we took a different approach, a deconstructed approach to understanding the relationship between bacteria as probiotics and then us and how we utilize probiotics in a therapeutic manner. I always go back to kind of evolutionary biology or some sort of anthropological evidence to go, did we do this for the largest part of human evolution, right? Sure. Did we do this culturally? Did we do this, from a biological perspective? So I started really looking at our relationship with bacteria and how we interacted with bacteria after we were born, and how some of those bacteria can become therapeutic. And the concept of how probiotics were being developed had no fit in any of that. No cultural fit, no evolutionary biology fit, no biological fit at all.
Yeah.
Right. So we deconstructed it and we came back and said, okay, let's look at microbes that we would naturally interact with that can actually function like probiotics. And that's where microbes that are present in the environment became important to us. Now, at that time, there was already this whole category of soil-based organisms as a probiotic category. We looked at that too, and we said, well, does that make more sense? Because we do interact with the soil in natural environments. We consume some of these bacteria, but the problem with soil-based organisms in the way that companies are doing it is that there's a lot of organisms in the soil that don't function as probiotics. Getting exposure to them can be beneficial, but they're not therapeutic, right? Because they don't survive the gastric system. Most of them are dying in the stomach. So you get a lot of bacterial debris. So we just kind of honed in on like what actually in the environment can act as a probiotic. That's where we came up with the spores. We went through a lot of research work on identifying whether spores actually act as a probiotic. Can they turn the tide on certain things that are happening in the gut? And then we came up with all of this concept and idea and what we would consider the next evolution in probiotics. And we presented it to this company. And in the time that we were doing the work, the company sold to a bigger entity. And the new management in the bigger entity was like, this is great and all that, but we're not going to do anything with it. So no thanks, but no thanks, right? And so then we were left with this dissatisfied feeling of discovering these misconceptions, knowing that people are spending billions of dollars a year buying these products and probably not getting any benefit of it. And then also knowing that we could likely develop something that was much more effective for people and actually turn the tide on their health, right? So we said, okay, we have to do something with this. We can't just have done this work and then back burner it. So we approached lots of companies in the healthcare practitioner space with the idea. And most of them kind of laughed us out the room because they were like, number one, nobody knows what a spore is. Nobody knows what a spore probiotic is. Right? No one's ever heard of that. We can't sell a 4 billion CFU product because our probiotic is 30 billion or 40 billion. So this doesn't make any sense. So everyone just said no. So that was the compelling force that we needed to go, okay, we just have to do this on our own, right? We have to get it out there. We're not funded. We don't have any investors. Probiotics is a very saturated, crowded market already. Most of our competitors are, hundreds of millions of dollars size companies. So we said, but this is needed. Right. And there's space for this. There's a need for this. There's a purpose for this. So we're just going to go out there and do it. And so we did. And that's how the company actually initiated, was just purely out of a need to service healthcare practitioners and their patients with a better option than what they were currently using.
I totally get that. That's exactly what I did. Yeah. Not as much research as you. I mean, I did a lot of research. I didn't do it in the way that you did it, but yeah, it was a need for, yes, it's a crowded market. There are tons of supplements out there, but that doesn't mean that the supplements out there are good or that they're doing the job or that they're as effective as they could be. Because when you really dive into the science, for me, I read about turmeric for years and I was like, there's so much power in turmeric, but I don't think anyone's actually trying to build this in a way that delivers a result that healthcare practitioners, at least Western allopathic physicians, can use alongside NSAIDs as an adjunct solution. So that was my target. So I agree with you. Sometimes you have this burning desire to make something because you know you can do better. And so even if you're walking into these shark-infested waters of multinational big companies, it's still worth it because you want to solve the problem in front of you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of supplement, marketeers enter markets out of opportunity rather than the need side of it, right? And that's where it's difficult. Now they can make money and they'll do well to some degree, but they're not servicing the industry properly. And I think when you come in with a significant need as your purpose, I think inevitably, if you take the right steps, you will do well because the market will identify that need, right? If you talk about it enough. When I say opportunity versus need, what I'm talking about is like most supplements in the supplement industry are opportunistic, meaning, collagen is now popular, so we're going to launch a collagen product, right? Or this is trending, so we're going to launch a product in this. And they just kind of do a copycat thing and copy what their competitors are doing with a different label and slightly different message. And that's an opportunity type of venture versus someone that comes into this not with any sort of forethought on like, this is where I'm going to go, but it's like, wait, I found a need. I need to service this. Nobody else is doing it. And I'm just going to move forward in this regard, right? So I love it. That's why when I met you, one of the things that really compelled me to go, I want to sit down and talk to her about it is because I saw that you're approaching the market to fulfill a need that was there. And you would do it better than anyone else in that regard, right? So I love it. I love that we have more and more brands coming out that are just servicing a need because those are going to be the most powerful products at the end of the day.
For sure. For me, I had thrown out my back and they put me on NSAIDs 24/7 for 7-10 days a week. And then it killed my stomach. And I was like, this is wrong. Do you guys do this to everybody? Because this is not sustainable. You can't kill our stomachs with 24/7 NSAIDs. That's not right. And then plantar fasciitis, same thing. I would get plantar fasciitis after having kids. And I was like, wait, your only solution is anti-inflammatories that are harmful? No, I have to solve this for myself. Like I need a long-term solution that works. And if I need it, I'm sure 1 million, 10 million, 100 million other people need it too. Yep. So yeah, I think it is so important to figure out what that problem is that you need a burning desire solution for, and then go after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then, when we started looking at probiotics, we went, okay, we found this unique spore-based approach, right. Which is supported by lots of evolutionary biology and even cultural things that we could identify. We said, okay, so then if we're going to look at a probiotic, what do we want a probiotic to actually do, right? What is the main effect that we wanted to elicit in the body? Some of the most common things are bloating and bowel movements and all that. Those are great, right? We do want to reduce bloating. We do want to improve bowel movements and so on. But to me, what was very evident was that the core fundamental thing a probiotic should be able to do is stop leaky gut. Yeah. Right. If you can stop or reduce leaky gut, then you're making a profound impact on somebody's health. So that's where we went with the spore-based probiotics. And I would argue to say that the spore-based probiotics are probably uniquely suited to be able to improve leaky gut compared to lots of other strains that are even utilized as probiotics. So then that became the singular focus for us is like, okay, we have to not only educate on leaky gut, but then we have to do the research and figure out how we actually alleviate leaky gut, right? Which then now fortunately has become a poignant topic in the healthcare space. Correct.
For me, for years, had my own long-term health struggles, couldn't understand why I had no immune system. That's what I called it. I should have no immune system. I have no defense system. Took me till late in my 30s in functional medicine to discover I had leaky gut. And I laughed because I was like, I'm the Ayurvedic practitioner and I have leaky gut. What does that say? That just shows you how likely it is as an American that we all have leaky gut going on. And so at your last conference, they gave me this beautiful art piece. I know those listening to the podcast can't see it, but it says, do you have leaky gut? And it shows your gut lining. So I'll be your display holder, but will you explain the science behind leaky gut and why it's so prevalent here in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we created that a number of years ago, and I don't know if you noticed, but you can draw on it. It's with dry erase, and you can make notations and all as you're talking to patients about it. And that was a really important schematic for us to create because we really want people to understand the pathology of leaky gut, right? So leaky gut is a term that's actually used to describe this reduction in the selective permeability of your intestines, right? So the intestines are supposed to be permeable to begin with because your lining of your intestines have to allow nutrients through. So you have to be able to absorb things through the lining of your nutrients, things that are happening above in what we call the lumen. So the lumen is at the tube part of your intestines, and then the lining is the wall of the intestines, right? Now, the wall of the intestines are structured in a very specific manner. So you've got the top layer, which is the outermost surface of the wall, is this outer mucosal layer. That's a more kind of liquid layer of the mucosa where most of the microorganisms live. Now, when you go beyond that, you've got this inner mucosa layer called mucin 2. That inner mucosa layer in that schematic, you'll see that there's in the healthy side of it, there's no microbes in it. right? That's one of the only sterile parts of the body. So if you look at the healthy side on, I guess it would be on your right side, that darker blue area, which is the inner part of the mucosa, there's no microbes in it, right? So all the microbes are in the lighter blue area up top. And then you've got, that's a lighter blue. And then you've got the inner darker blue sterile mucosal layer. And then below that are the intestinal epithelial cells, which are the lining cells of your intestines. And it's a one cell thick barrier. Right. So it's only a single cell layer thick. Wow. It's the final barrier between something being truly outside of the body versus inside of the body. We have this misconception that when we swallow something, it's in your body. It's actually not in your body because your digestive tract is a tube that's open on both ends, so it can move through, right? For it to be truly inside of your body, it has to go through that top mucous layer where all the microbes are, that inner mucus layer where there's no microbes, and then past the intestinal epithelial lining and then into circulation, right? That's where it ends up truly inside your body. So when you look at nutrients, for example, food comes into the tube section of your intestines. It gets broken down by your enzymes, by microbes, and so on in the tube section. And then once the nutrients are released, it migrates past that top layer of the mucus, it migrates past the inner layer of mucus, it goes past the intestinal cells, and then gets absorbed in circulation where you can utilize it. Now, at the same time, we don't want bacteria, viruses, toxins, and all going through that same path. So what does the gut look like in order to prevent bacteria and viruses and all from going through? That top part of the mucus layer, where most of the microbes live, and this is what'll explain your immune dysfunctions when you have leaky gut, right? So where all those microbes live in that top part of the mucus layer, that's that layer that first encounters anything that's going to move through the lining of your gut, right? So whether it's food particles, whether it's a virus, whether it's bacteria or toxin, it's going to first end up in that dense population of microbes in that top layer. Now, assuming you have the right microbes, you have friendly commensal microbes, what they're going to do is they're going to signal to the immune system that is way below where the lining of the intestine is that, hey, here's something that's coming through that needs attention, right? The microbes are the first thing to detect the presence of things that shouldn't be in the lining of the gut, whether it's a toxin, whether it's a new virus, a new bacteria, and so on. So then that starts to alert the immune system, right? So then as that thing that shouldn't be there migrates past that top layer and hits that denser sterile layer, that sterile layer is denser because it slows down the migration of things as it approaches the intestinal epithelium or the lining of the intestinal cells. That gives time for the immune system to detect what that is and then elicit a necessary response. Now, in some cases, it may not need to respond to it at all because it may be something that your immune system should tolerate, right? So the immune system has time to make that decision, and it's communicating with the microbes above in order to make all of those decisions. But it needs that time as that thing is migrating through that denser, thicker mucus layer. And then by the time it gets to the intestinal epithelium, if it's something that should move through, the intestinal cells can actually split open, and the space in between them, called tight junctions, will allow the molecule through. Or if it's a small enough molecule, it may actually go through the intestinal cells themselves, right? So it goes from the top part of the intestinal cell through the cell and comes out the bottom itself, right? So that is a normal process that is supposed to happen. Now, here's where things start to go awry and where your gut can become leaky. Number one, you start losing a lot of the important commensal organisms in that top layer. Which means you don't have bacteria communicating with your immune system about what's entering the body, right? So now instead, you've got pathogenic and other dysfunctional bacteria that are not only not communicating with your immune system about what's coming through, they're also going as far as eating away at that inner sterile, thicker mucus lining, right? So that part that slows down the transit time of things going through, giving the immune system a chance to respond to stuff, that layer is getting eaten away by dysfunctional bacteria. So now you don't have the capability of slowing down the transition of things. Things are just moving through quite rapidly. and then making their way to the intestinal epithelium, where they will bust through those cells if those cells are intact to begin with, right? So you've got this complete dysfunction of communication between the microbiome and the immune system. The immune system is not getting messages from the microbiome as to what's coming through, what's friend, what's foe. So then what the immune system tends to do is it diverts towards just attacking everything. Right? Because it doesn't know what's coming through, right? So everything that comes through, including food particles, including things it should be tolerating, will elicit a massive inflammatory immune response. Now you start getting inflammatory damage in the lining of the gut, which then further damages the mucosal layer and further damages the intestinal lining cells, thereby disrupting that whole barrier and making the gut more and more leaky. And as more things leak through, you get more recruitment of immune cells, more inflammation, and more leakiness. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle, right? So at the end of the day, what you end up with is a leaky and inflamed gut lining. And then that inflammation triggers systemic inflammation as toxins and other things leak through the lining into the body. And those toxins make their way to all parts of the body, your joints, your heart, your brain, and all that, and eliciting an inflammatory response in all these other regions. So the biggest issue with leaky gut is not only that it disrupts digestive function and disrupts your body's ability to break down, assimilate nutrients properly, discern the environment around you, build tolerance and all that. It also drives systemic inflammation in one of the most profound ways. And we know systemic inflammation is the absolute root cause driver for most chronic disease, right? So it becomes a very potent source of chronic low-grade inflammation in the body.
That was a lot, Kiran. That was a lot for any one person to absorb, but you explained it so beautifully. There are these layers, and the problem is when we cause disruption and dysbiosis, which most of us do, have not really met someone who has this beautiful, idyllic farm life without any stress, who's eating organic and fresh, and the water quality is amazing and the air quality is right. So those idyllic situations don't really exist anymore. Instead, we have modern day times. And this self-perpetuating cycle that only gets worse, the way you described it, sounds like the beginning stages of leaky gut can go so south so fast. Yeah. And then what I see is people coming to me who are like with very serious autoimmune conditions, and they're not being given real solutions. Like, I'm not bashing all the systems of medicine, but oftentimes in rheumatology, they're being given drug A, drug B, and told you just get to live with that for the rest of your life. And I find that so frustrating. I don't want that kind of an answer. I want to hear through all these changes, you can actually put this thing into remission, maybe not reverse it completely, but remission. So can you kind of speak into, sometimes I need to hear the worst thing for me to step up and do the work. I don't know if everyone else has that mindset, but will you kind of share things you've seen in terms of how bad leaky gut can go and what that looks like in people?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big problems with leaky gut is it can be what we call subclinical for a long time, right? So subclinical meaning there's no actual clinical manifestation of it yet, but it's brewing. And when it gets to a certain point, what it does is it creates a cascade of dysfunctions that start to occur in sequence. So you might have had a course of antibiotics when you're 5 years old for strep throat, let's say, right? And that course of antibiotics created enough of disruption in your microbiome that a part of your gut became leaky. Now, when you're younger, your body has a propensity to be able to repair itself a little bit better than as you get older, right? So that leaky portion may get repaired and damaged, repaired and damaged, repaired and damaged over and over again. You might be consuming lots of, glyphosate from processed food, so herbicides and pesticides. You might be consuming gluten. You might be consuming lots of processed food. So all of those things will continue to damage the gut, but your body starts to repair it effectively so that you don't have clinical manifestations. But that cycle is still repeating itself in your body. Now, you get to a certain age and your body simply doesn't repair itself as effectively as it used to, right? We all experience this. We know that as you get to a certain age, aches and pains last a little bit longer. If you get injured, it takes longer to recover. If you go out for a fun night in Vegas, for example, and you have too many cocktails, it takes way longer to recover than when you were 21 years old, right? When you're 29 or 30 even, right? So that ability of the body to repair itself effectively starts to reduce over time. And that's what allows leaky gut to start to propagate in a very significant way if you're not managing it effectively, right? So here's what tends to happen with people. It starts to manifest itself as digestive issues. Now, the problem with that is a lot of people feel that they should be able to live with a certain degree of digestive issues, right? I'll often ask people, I'm like, how you doing? How you feeling? They'll go, oh, I feel great. How's your digestion? Oh, it's great as long as I don't eat this, and this. Like they'll list 30 things that they can't eat, right? And, I get some bloating and cramping and, I have loose stool some days and all, but it's fine generally, right? So people don't see those things as being signals that something is significantly wrong, right? They feel that you should be able to live with some loose stool every, few times a week. You should be able to live with not going to the bathroom, for 4 days. You should be able to live with having to have this very restricted diet because there's now a whole categories of foods that you can no longer tolerate. So those are the things that start to manifest first, right? Now, once that starts to manifest, your immune system is starting to get compromised after that. So then what you start to see when your immune system gets compromised, because your microbiome and immune system are very closely related, you start to see immune dysregulation in the form of intolerances, right? Oh, I used to be able to eat this thing, but now I can't tolerate it anymore, right? Or all of a sudden I developed allergies. All of a sudden now ragweed and pollen causes you sinusitis in the fall that you never used to have, right? All of a sudden you start developing eczema or itchy patches or red patches on your skin. Your skin dries out a little bit too fast, right? All of these things are a signal of immune dysfunctions that can go into autoimmune disease as well. So a lot of people start to develop things like lupus or psoriasis. All of these things are autoimmune-like conditions. Now that starts to scale. Now you start to develop metabolic syndrome, right? People start to put on weight. Most people end up putting on weight in their 30s and 40s, right? And of course, a lot of it is lifestyle, but your microbiome is also moving towards a pro-obese, a pro-glucose intolerant type of metabolic conformation. So people start to put on weight, their A1C starts to go up, their fasting glucose start to go up. They have now the picture of metabolic syndrome. Now, when you have all those things in place, when you have immune dysregulation, digestive disorders, you're moving towards metabolic syndrome. That is the perfect storm for much scarier long-term chronic issues, right? We're talking about development of things like rheumatoid arthritis, early signs of things like autoimmune diseases like psoriasis, eczema, like we talked about, but then it can go into much more serious things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? It can go into, inflammation in the heart, inflammation in the joints. You start to develop anxiety and depression that you never had, right? Because now the gut brain axis is dysfunctional. You start to sleep poorly because you're in this anxious, activated state. All of those things are a symptom of chronic low-grade inflammation, and it starts to spiral out of control. A lot of people will tell me, they go, I've had lots of health problems over the last few years. Okay, what's going on? Well, I've got eczema, I've got reflux, I've got anxiety, I've got early stages of type 2 diabetes. They list all these things as if they are unrelated conditions, and they've just developed these different conditions. They're all driven by the same thing, right? They're driven by the same underlying digestive leaky gut, chronic low-grade inflammation condition. And so all of that can perpetuate into cancer risk, heart disease risk, right? Brain tumors, dementia, Alzheimer's, all the scariest stuff. All comes from all of these origins of digestive disorders, immune disorders, and so on, right? All of it constantly being driven by chronic low-grade inflammation. This is why 60% of adults in the US have more than one chronic illness, right? 60%, which is an insane number for people dealing with chronic illnesses. And you mentioned, the rheumatology approach and so on. Modern medicine, unfortunately, is designed around symptom management and kind of abating symptoms here and there versus looking at root cause, right? And that's why these things can keep propagating, because the foundational root driver of chronic low-grade inflammation, leaky gut, digestive issues, and immune dysfunction are still there. It'll pop up in one way or the other in your system.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. It's so true. It does create that stack up of issues and not just symptoms, but diagnoses. So when we start to see the stacking of diagnoses, it's like, okay, well, thank you for the data. Now let's take a minute and look at how we want to actually approach treating that stack, because I don't want to take 10 drugs to deal with 10 symptoms and 10 issues. I meet so many people who are in that boat where it's like, oh, I take these 10 things. I can't taste my food anymore. I'm never hungry. And I've got 3 new drugs to manage my symptoms from the 10 that I'm taking. And so that's just a place we don't want to be. And that's why I think it's so important to learn about these different things. So how can someone who maybe isn't going to functional medicine yet, I want everyone to go to functional medicine and dive deep into their health and get their real diagnostics done at a deeper level. But how can they know symptomatically if they likely have subclinical leaky gut?
Yeah. So I would say, based on our research, and we've done a couple of studies on leaky gut, that at least 90% of adults in the US have leaky gut to some degree or the other, right? It may be a 1-foot section of their bowel is leaky and driving a certain degree of inflammation, or they might have 18 feet of their bowel being leaky and they have very profound conditions. So I would say, if you've experienced any of these things, or you're currently experiencing any of these things, you more than likely have leaky gut, right? So if you have any sort of digestive issues, so irregular bowel movements, bloating when you eat certain foods, intolerance of certain foods, right? Sensitivity, so allergies, asthma, immune dysfunctions. If you have anxiety or depression or some degree of anxiety, well, even if you're not fully diagnosed with anxiety, if you experience some sort of panic or anxiety throughout the day, if you have trouble sleeping, if you have skin issues, like you have redness, acne or inflamed skin, you have eczema, psoriasis, or if you are dealing with true conditions, if you have autoimmune diagnosis, right? If you're dealing with obesity, if you're dealing with blood sugar control issues, if you're dealing with sleep disorders, all of those things are driven by a leaky gut. And most people are dealing with something like that, right? Yeah, most of those the origins are from leaky gut. And so I would say one of the most important things people can do for their health is assume they have leaky gut,
right?
And then design their life and lifestyle and choices around negating and improving that leaky gut condition.
Absolutely. That makes total sense.
Because if you think about it, all the things that we know of that are good for your health in general, most of those things also have data showing that it improves leaky gut.
For sure.
Right? So I just did a video yesterday on exercise, both endurance exercise and weightlifting, right? And both of those things we know are very good for our health overall, right? And then when you get down to the biochemistry of how those things help overall health and how they prolong longevity and negate chronic illness and all that, there's a number of mechanisms, but a key mechanism is both of those things modulate the gut microbiome. Both of those things increase diversity of the gut microbiome, increase keystone species that protect the lining of the gut and rebuild the lining of the gut. And both of those things reduce leaky gut and chronic low-grade inflammation. Right. So that's a big, important thing. Having a clean diet, going from processed foods to real foods that are clean, organic, and all that. What is a huge improvement when you do that? Well, you're actually reducing leaky gut. You're improving the diversity of your microbiome, reducing inflammation, and rebuilding the lining of the gut. What happens when you sleep adequately? One of the key things that happen when you sleep is you increase the diversity of your microbiome, you reduce inflammation, you rebuild the lining of the gut, right? So many of these things that we know to be good behaviors for your overall health actually fundamentally improve your gut, improve the lining of the gut, and thereby stop leaky gut, which is a big source of chronic illness.
Thank you for sharing that. So basically what you're saying is all the good things that we're all teaching in the health and wellness world right now, maybe not on the two extremes, but even from Ayurvedic medicine, to put in place amazing sleep, amazing gut health practices, amazing diet, lifestyle, exercise, movement, stress management are all the key tools to bring that leaky gut down. And then we're going to have that vibrant health we want.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You need to do some supplementation, right? So I always recommend a good probiotic, like the spore-based probiotic, a good prebiotic, and fiber supplements, turmeric, curcumin, which are powerful tools, these phytochemicals that can really move the needle for people. And then on top of that, good lifestyle practices, right? So, for example, being outdoors, getting out and doing a walk, low endurance, kind of fast walking, slow jogging, those kind of things. There's two benefits to it. Is the exercise itself will have a positive effect on your gut, but being outside actually has a significant positive effect on your gut and your gut microbiome and leaky gut because of interaction with environmental bacteria, right? So that in itself can do that. So yeah, absolutely. If you're conscious about your microbiome, feeding your microbiome the right things, avoiding the things that we know harm the microbes, right? And then containing a lifestyle that supports your ecosystem, all of that is going to prevent or reverse leaky gut and thereby give you long-term health and wellness.
I love what you just said. Create a lifestyle that supports your ecosystem. It's a powerful statement. It's our gut ecosystem. It is the ecosystem that's driving everything. And if we can create a lifestyle that supports that, in Ayurveda, we call it the digestive fire. If we can honor that first, then we've got the health that we want that supports everything else.
Absolutely. And the biggest fault of modern living is that we've developed lots and lots of things that we surround ourselves with, right? So if you think about our personal care products that we use, the foods that we consume, the chemicals we use all around our homes and workplaces and all that, the glues that are found in everything, all of these things, most of those things have never been tested for how it impacts your ecosystem. And when it is tested, we come to find out that they have a very negative impact on your ecosystem, right? Most of the things we surround ourselves with are antimicrobial to some degree or the other, which means that we are a beautiful microbial construct. This is how we function. And we've taken this construct and put it in an antimicrobial world, right? So we are humans as an ecosystem. The world we live in is an anti-human world. And so the more and more we can become conscious about our ecosystem and preserving the ecosystem, the more and more we'll enjoy wellness. If you look at all the blue zones, right? All the things that they inevitably practice in the blue zones, the way they eat, the way they live, the way they function from day to day, and so on, their interactions with people, all of those things support their ecosystem. This is why they can live over to 100 plus without disease, without chronic illness, and have really a thriving lifestyle.
It's how powerful. We are made of microbes and we are living in an antimicrobial world. We're basically creating a world to kill ourselves.
Yeah, we do a good job of
it. That's like the best way to explain insanity right there. Is we're human trying to live this beautiful life, yet we're creating all the things to destroy it through our cleaning products, through our environments that we are creating to be beautiful, but really they're not beautiful for our physical selves.
Yep.
It's insane. I know that we're going to have to wrap up soon. I feel like I could talk to you for like hours and hours and hours, and I'm sure we will over time. But I have two last questions for you. One is your thoughts on gluten, because gluten is so inflammatory to so many, but it's hard for people to give up and they want to eat their gluten. And then part two, you mentioned curcumin, which of course I'm the turmeric girl. I love hearing everyone's thoughts on turmeric. So just your thoughts on turmeric as a phytochemical for gut health.
Yeah, I think, we'll start with turmeric, right? So I love turmeric. I grew up in India, of course, and so it's a staple part of everything that we do, both internally and externally as well. We use turmeric and all that on the skin, which can be very powerful. I love the use of those kind of phytochemicals because that's how we evolve, right? Humans with their ingenuity and innovation have discovered thousands of years ago that, hey, this seed or this plant or this root provides you this benefit. And then we utilize it culturally. So that's what I meant early on when I said in our conversation that things have to have validation through cultural use as well. There has to be a few thousands of years of validation. And then now modern science can explain the actual mechanisms by how that works, right? So one of the things I take on a daily basis is turmeric and curcumin. I eat a lot of turmeric and curcumin, and I take it as a supplement as well, because it's one of those really beautiful things that nature has provided us. And not only in food tastes great, but then also as a supplement works amazingly well to reduce inflammation. I'm constantly focusing on supporting my ecosystem and reducing inflammation. Right? You cannot do that enough, I think. And so if you focus on just those two things, I think you'll live a really healthy and thriving life. That also gives you resilience, right? And that resilience allows you to enjoy things like gluten from time to time and not be to the detriment of you, right? I believe truly in the 80-20 rule. I want to make 20% bad decisions and be okay, right? Why do I want to do that? Because there's a lot of living that occurs in those bad decisions, right? Yeah. And so I want to be able to go and have beer and pizza with my friends because it's someone's birthday and that's what they want for their birthday, right? I don't want to go to the pizza joint and sit there and like pull out my little, kale salad and eat it secretly. Right. I want to be able to enjoy things like that. I want to be able to have a good night out with people and not pay for it for the next 3 weeks. Right. And that requires resilience. That resilience comes from the 80% right decisions that you make. It allows you 20% slack because the body is resilient. We're designed in our biology to be able to handle a certain degree of stress and a certain degree of dysfunction and bounce back from it. And in fact, a certain degree of stress and dysfunction can actually build more resilience, right? We know that certain things like heat stress, cold stress, exercise stress, which resistance training is a stress on your body and tears your muscle, right? And then our adaptation against that stress makes us more resilient. So I think tools like curcumin, turmeric, and phytochemistry and antioxidants and carotenoids and polyphenols are all beautiful things that nature has provided us that we can utilize to really enhance our resilience and improve our health overall. So I can't say enough good things about it.
Nice. Beautiful. Thank you. And before we wrap up, do you have any last messages that you want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. So a very, very important message, and this is why I'm in the industry that I'm in, is really a message of hope, right? Because one of the things that occurs to people when they start to get labeled with a chronic disease, here's your chronic disease. This is now your label. Number one, that disease becomes their identity, right? And I want people to know that they need to separate themselves from their chronic illness. They're not a SIBO person, right? They're not a Hashimoto's person. They happen to have that as a temporary reflection of what's happening in their body, but it doesn't mean you have to live with that, right? And it doesn't mean that that is your label. So that's one thing. Number two, know that there's a lot of hope for wellness. It doesn't matter if you had the shittiest childhood and you ate the worst foods and you've had 50 rounds of antibiotics and all that. The beauty of an ecosystem is you can always improve it, right? Your genes, you can't change your genes that much, right? You can't change certain aspects of your biology, but your ecosystem, you can absolutely improve it. And when you improve it, it has the most profound effect on your health. So no matter what chronic disease you're dealing with right now, know that there is hope and know that you can make significant improvements on it. You just have to empower yourself with the knowledge to do it. And you have to make small little changes throughout your day that all will add up to being a significant thing, right? So there's lots of hope out there. Don't feel like your disease is your identity and that there's no hope because your doctor said, oh, we don't have a pill for that, right? Know that you can change it. Know that you just have to empower yourself with information like this.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love that message to end our podcast interview today. That is such a powerful message for so many who do feel like the issue they have with their body is them. And that's simply not true. We are our own ecosystem. You're right. We can develop it. We can change it. We can morph it. We can transform it over time. So thank you for that powerful message of hope today, Kiran.
It's my pleasure. And you are a perfect example of that, right? You were dealing with health issues that for certain individuals, that would have been their identity, right? And that's what they would have dealt with for the rest of their lives. And it would have spiraled into more and more dysfunction. Fortunately, you had the capacity and the knowledge and the information to go out there and figure out the problem. So you're living proof of that hope.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I believe we can all win at our health. Every single day, we can transform it. We can change it. This body is an iteration, and we get to transition and improve it throughout our whole life and enjoy that journey along the way. So thank you so much for being on here today. I really appreciate you being on here. And I feel like we could talk about so many topics. So I can't wait to have you on here again someday.
We'll do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.